The room was buzzing with excitement, the kind of tension that only comes with family gatherings. My sister Hannah was glowing in her engagement dress, and everywhere I looked, people were smiling, clinking glasses, and whispering congratulations. I should have felt happy, celebrating her special day, but the moment I stepped into the room, a wave of unease washed over me. From the corner of the hall, I caught sight of the first smirk. My cousins, distant relatives, and even some old family friends glanced at me with those familiar, piercing eyes that seemed to dissect every detail of my appearance. The mockery wasn't subtle. A whisper here, a stifled laugh there, and the occasional pointed glance. "Look at her outfit," one cousin whispered to another. "She really thinks she belongs here?" I tried to ignore them, reminding myself that this was Hannah's night, not mine. But when my sister's fiancé Jared walked by and smirked, patting my shoulder with a laugh that was supposed to be friendly but clearly wasn't, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected: anger. I had always been the quiet one, the overlooked sibling, the one people dismissed without a second thought. And tonight, in this crowded room filled with the people who were supposed to love and support me, that dismissal became almost tangible. "She works at that tiny startup, right?" Someone whispered behind me. "Her salary probably wouldn't even cover a dress like that." I smiled politely, letting the words roll off me. If they wanted to see a reaction, I wasn't going to give it. But inside, a storm was brewing. Years of quiet perseverance, years of building myself up in the shadows while everyone else assumed I was failing. All of that gritted teeth patience had been leading to a moment like this. As the night went on, their whispers grew louder. My uncle, the one who always prided himself on knowing people's real worth, leaned close to a family friend. "I don't see how she thinks she can keep up with us," he said, shaking his head with feigned concern. "Someone like her, with no connections, no money, no influence, she really should know her place." That was it. The moment where quiet patience met cold realization. For the first time, I felt the need to draw a line, to make it clear that underestimating me was a mistake they would regret. But I also knew this wasn't the time for loud confrontation. I had to wait, let their assumptions do the work for me. They believed they were untouchable. They believed their laughter was harmless. The rest of the night was a blur of polite exchanges, fake smiles, and careful steps around the room. I watched as my sister, oblivious to the tension, floated through the crowd, engaged in excited conversation about wedding plans, and I knew, deep down, that the most powerful part of my plan wouldn't be to embarrass anyone in the moment. It would be to reveal the truth when they least expected it, in a way that no one could dismiss. By the end of the evening, as the music swelled and the champagne flowed, I excused myself politely, slipping out to the balcony for a breath of cold night air. The city lights glittered below, a reminder that the world outside this hall was much bigger than their narrow judgments. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. They would remember me, not for the whispers or the judgment, but for the power and influence I had quietly built while they mocked me. The days after the engagement were filled with polite text messages and congratulatory calls, but underneath the surface, I felt an electric tension. Every time I thought about the mocking whispers, the patronizing laughs, and the dismissive glances, a quiet determination took root. I realized that being underestimated wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon I could wield. I returned to my apartment, a modest but functional space that most people would have scoffed at. Yet within these walls, I had been quietly building something powerful for years. My job at the company was small in title but immense in opportunity. From my desk tucked in the corner, I had learned the inner workings of operations, finance, and strategy. While my family assumed I was struggling, I was quietly taking notes, learning every detail about the business world they claimed I couldn't master. Late nights became my sanctuary. While they celebrated their superficial accomplishments, I pored over spreadsheets, studied market trends, and built connections that no one outside my circle could see. I invested time in people, in understanding their needs, in anticipating moves before they happened. Each small, unnoticed victory added to a growing foundation of power that no mocking glance could touch. Months passed, and my network grew stronger. I started taking calculated risks, investing wisely, and quietly acquiring shares in several subsidiaries related to the company I worked for. Every conversation I had, every handshake I made, added to a web of influence that was invisible to my family but undeniable in the business world. Their laughter, their judgment, and their underestimation became my fuel. They had assumed that my quiet life meant I was powerless, but power doesn't announce itself. It accumulates in silence. At the same time, I cultivated an image that matched their expectations. Polite, unassuming, and seemingly ordinary. I attended family gatherings when invited, smiled through the whispers, and carried myself with a calm composure that masked the storm of strategy brewing beneath. They continued to mock me, blissfully unaware that every sarcastic comment, every snide remark, reinforced their eventual shock. Then came the turning point. I identified a critical moment within the company's structure, a potential acquisition that could catapult me into a position of undeniable influence. Using the experience I had accumulated, I orchestrated a series of investments, leveraging the assets I had quietly accrued. Within months, my stake in the company grew to a controlling interest. What they had assumed was a modest, struggling employee was now a key player in the empire they thought they understood. Meanwhile, I never lost sight of my sister's engagement and the network that had laughed at me. I observed the family from a distance, noting their decisions, their arrogance, and their blind spot. Each move they made only solidified my understanding that timing and presentation were everything. The moment to reveal the truth had to be flawless, public, and undeniable. By the time I was ready to act, I had assembled everything needed: the shares, the legal authority, and the influence within the company to command attention. I also ensured that the media and business partners would be watching, magnifying the eventual reveal. The plan wasn't just about proving a point, it was about demonstrating the quiet strength of someone underestimated. As I prepared for the engagement anniversary party, where I knew the family would gather again, I felt a sense of anticipation unlike anything I had experienced before. The night would no longer be about polite smiles or whispers. It would be about a stunning reversal of perception, where the very people who had mocked me would witness the full measure of my success. I spent the days leading up to the event fine-tuning every detail. Invitations were checked, press contacts confirmed, and the presentation rehearsed. I also coordinated with my personal assistant, ensuring that everything, from timing to positioning, would reinforce the impact of the reveal. The suspense was deliberate. The more they expected me to be ordinary, the more explosive the truth would become. Finally, the evening arrived. As I dressed in a tailored outfit that radiated understated elegance, I felt the weight of years of preparation settle comfortably on my shoulders. Each accessory, each subtle choice in clothing, was designed to communicate power without arrogance. This was a night where silence, strategy, and preparation would speak louder than words. Stepping into the hall, I felt the familiar flicker of whispers and pointed glances, but this time I smiled, not nervously, but with confidence. I was no longer the one they could dismiss. I had become the unseen force behind their world, and tonight, the truth would unfold in a way they would never forget. The room was alive with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. My sister's engagement celebration had reached its peak, with everyone immersed in congratulations, selfies, and endless discussions about wedding plans. I walked in quietly, my presence unnoticed at first, just as I had intended. They still believed me to be the ordinary, overlooked sibling, the one who had no power, no influence, no importance. I paused near the entrance, scanning the crowd. My sister was radiant, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Her fiancé Jared was laughing with friends, seemingly unaware that the evening would turn into an unforgettable moment. And then I saw them, the family members who had mocked me, whispered behind my back, and dismissed me at every opportunity. Their eyes flicked toward me as I approached, recognition dawning slowly, paired with the usual sneer. I smiled politely, maintaining the composure of someone who belonged nowhere special. But behind the calm exterior, a calculated plan was unfolding. I gave a subtle nod to my assistant, who signaled that everything was in place. From the corner, the staff had already prepared a visual presentation that would broadcast my position and influence to the entire room. Every detail had been coordinated to perfection. A hush began to settle as the first slides appeared on the large screen at the front of the hall. I walked toward the stage slowly, letting their gazes follow me. The screen flashed a corporate logo, one they all recognized but could never have guessed I was behind. I let a pause linger, savoring the disbelief already creeping into their expressions. "My name is Emily Carter," I began, projecting a voice calm but commanding. "Some of you know me as your sister, your cousin, or a distant family member, but tonight, I'd like to introduce you to another side of me, the side you never expected." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few raised eyebrows, some exchanged whispers. I continued, unflinching. "Over the past several years, I have quietly built a network of businesses, investments, and partnerships. And one of those ventures happens to employ, pay, and rely on the very people you all work for, including the company that Jared's father and some of you are affiliated with." The room grew colder, the murmurs turning into astonished gasps. I could see the subtle changes on their faces, the disbelief, the fear, the creeping realization that the ordinary sibling they had mocked was the architect of influence in their world. I gestured toward the screen, and a series of slides displayed financial reports, ownership percentages, and logos that made it undeniable. I was the controlling shareholder. I was the investor, the overseer, the one with the power they had never imagined. Their mouths were open, eyes wide, and hands frozen mid-gesture. "I suppose this might come as a shock," I said, letting a small smile curve my lips. "You mocked me for being ordinary, dismissed my career choices, and laughed at my ambitions. Yet here I stand, not as a powerless relative, but as the person who owns and manages a significant portion of the company you all rely on." Jared's face went pale. My sister, frozen, stared with a mixture of awe and fear. I had chosen this moment not to humiliate anyone cruelly, but to reveal the truth of what perseverance and quiet determination can achieve. The juxtaposition between their assumptions and reality was stark and utterly undeniable. I stepped closer, allowing my voice to carry to every corner of the hall. "The lesson here is simple. Underestimate someone based on appearance, status, or income, and you risk being blind to their true power. I built this empire quietly, strategically, and without fanfare. And tonight, you see the results." One by one, the family members who had laughed, whispered, and mocked me now sat frozen, unable to deny the undeniable. The whispers of disbelief had turned into silence. Every glance, every judgment, every dismissive remark they had ever made was reflected back in stunned faces of recognition. I paused, letting the moment settle. The impact was total. I didn't need to raise my voice, deliver insults, or seek vengeance. The proof was already visible. The charts, the logos, the evidence of my success. The room that had once judged me now had to reconsider everything they thought they knew about me. "And for those who doubted me," I continued, my tone calm but firm, "you are now confronted with the result of underestimating someone who refused to be defined by your opinions. Let this be a reminder: respect is earned, not given freely, and influence comes quietly, often unnoticed, until it isn't." By now, some family members were visibly shaken. Jared's father clenched his jaw, realizing that the woman he had dismissed as inconsequential was in fact the person who held the cards in the game he thought he controlled. My cousins and aunts and uncles, who had whispered behind my back for years, now looked as though they were searching for an escape from the truth staring back at them. I let the silence linger, savoring the impact without saying a word more. Then, with a graceful smile, I added, "Tonight isn't about revenge. Tonight is about recognition. About showing that perseverance, intelligence, and quiet action can achieve what mockery and doubt never could." As I stepped down from the stage, the room remained frozen, the atmosphere transformed. Where once there had been whispers of disdain, there was now awe, and a subtle, unspoken understanding that the ordinary sibling they had underestimated had emerged as extraordinary. And in that moment, I knew that the game had changed. The mocking, judgmental family members had witnessed my triumph, not because I sought to hurt them, but because I refused to let their opinions define my path. The revelation had shattered their assumptions and, more importantly, solidified my place not just in the family, but in the world I had quietly built for myself. The room was still buzzing with disbelief as I stepped away from the stage. What had begun as my sister's engagement celebration had transformed into a silent courtroom of judgment, where my past mockers were now confronted with undeniable evidence of my success. Their eyes, wide with shock, followed me as I moved through the crowd, each glance a subtle acknowledgement of the power I now wielded. I paused near the dessert table where my cousins had gathered, whispering frantically among themselves. Their faces were pale, and their voices, usually brimming with confidence and judgment, had been replaced by nervous murmurs. I caught snippets of conversation, words like how, impossible, and she owns them, floated to me, each confirming the impact of my revelation. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile, knowing that the point had landed perfectly. My sister, standing off to the side with Jared, was frozen, clutching her champagne flute tightly. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was proud, confused, and perhaps a little embarrassed that the entire family's perception had been shattered right before her. I approached her calmly. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," I said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "I came to show that success isn't about what others think of you. It's about what you're willing to do quietly and persistently, without seeking validation from anyone." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and for the first time that evening, she smiled. You've really done it," she whispered. "I can't believe I ever doubted you." Her words carried both relief and awe, a testament to how deeply entrenched the family's preconceived notions had been. As the evening continued, I watched as the family tried to recalibrate. My aunt, who had always scoffed at my career choices, now kept her distance, unsure of how to speak to someone who had just demonstrated such overwhelming influence. My uncle, who had whispered cruel remarks about my ambitions for years, now offered a hesitant smile, a silent acknowledgement of defeat. The shift in dynamics was palpable. Respect had replaced mockery, though grudgingly, and fear mixed with awe in equal measure. Jared, my sister's fiancé, finally approached me. He had been a skeptic, assuming my success was either overstated or inherited. Now, standing face to face with the woman who had orchestrated this empire, his expression was one of humility, mixed with respect. "Emily," he began, his voice measured, "I had no idea. You've accomplished everything. I underestimated you." I nodded, maintaining a composed exterior while savoring the satisfaction of seeing judgment transform into acknowledgement. "It's not about underestimating me," I replied calmly. "It's about realizing that determination, vision, and action speak louder than assumptions, whispers, or mockery." By the time the night drew to a close, the family members who had mocked me were no longer laughing or whispering. The room was filled with a quiet respect, an acknowledgement that I had not only succeeded in my own right, but had done so in a way that exposed the superficiality of their judgment. The engagement celebration had become an unintentional stage for a lesson in humility and the power of perseverance. Later, as I walked out into the cool evening air with my sister by my side, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Every moment of doubt, every whispered insult, every skeptical glance had fueled the fire that led me to this moment. I had not sought revenge in the conventional sense. There was no anger in my revelation, but rather, I had demonstrated the ultimate power, transformation through quiet, relentless action. As we hailed a cab to leave, my sister squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice earnest. "Not just for showing them, but for showing me. I've learned more tonight than I ever thought I would." I smiled, knowing that the night's impact would be remembered not only by my family, but also by anyone who had ever doubted the quiet strength of someone they underestimated. The cab pulled away, and I looked back at the house from the window, seeing the faces of those who had mocked me one final time. Their expressions were a mixture of awe, shame, and respect, a tableau that would remain etched in my memory forever. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of closure, a validation that my journey, though challenging and often lonely, had been worth every step. Success, I realized, is never just about money, status, or recognition. It is about proving, first and foremost to oneself, that determination, vision, and patience can overcome the harshest judgments. And tonight, in that room filled with whispers and astonished faces, I had proven exactly that. As the city lights blurred past the cab window, I thought of the countless nights of hard work, the calculated risks, and the unwavering belief that I could achieve more than anyone thought possible. I had turned their doubt into motivation, their mockery into fuel, and their assumptions into a stage for revelation. Every moment of struggle had led to this moment of undeniable triumph. By the time we reached my apartment, the night had settled into a quiet serenity. My sister hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You've changed everything," she whispered. "For all of us." I nodded, feeling the weight of the journey lift from my shoulders. "No, we've changed everything," I corrected gently. "Not just me, us." And the most important lesson? Never let anyone else define your worth. Your determination, your vision, and your action define it for you. That night, I slept with a sense of fulfillment that was deeper than any material success could provide. The family who had once mocked me would now carry the memory of my triumph forever, a silent reminder that underestimating someone is often the first step in witnessing their true power. And as I drifted to sleep, I knew this was not the end. It was just another chapter in a life built on resilience, intelligence, and quiet, unyielding strength.